Now, how awesome was that, Giants fans? How refreshing was it to see an adult finally in the room? Man, I mean, I got the chills. I got to be honest. I had the chills throughout my body watching that press conference where John Harbaugh officially, I'm so jacked up I could barely speak, officially got introduced as the head coach of the New York Football Giants. I'm Bryce Gelman. Going to be talking about that. I have some notes I wanted to discuss about that, my reaction in general. And we go from the good and we're going to go to the bad. We got to discuss the Knicks. That has been a dumpster fire, something that I've been refraining from discussing, something that I've chosen to disassociate from, but it's time to call a spade a spade. It's time to look it directly in the face and discuss it. So I'm going to be getting into the Knicks a little bit later. John Harbaugh, the conversation about him, I want to start with. First off, and this doesn't need any notes. I don't need any notes for this. Joe Schoen comes up to start the press conference. Have you ever seen anyone as anxious and as nervous as he was when he stepped up to the podium? I thought it was hilarious. I didn't know if Joe Schoen was going to be able to get through that introduction. It was only like a minute and a half, 2 minutes. And he seemed like, a middle schooler giving a school presentation in front of the entire school. It seemed like he was like me during my bar mitzvah at the Bima. Extremely nervous. I think even now you could put me in front of that crowd and I would have done a better job than Joe Schoen. He was even worse than he was immediately following the season or immediately after the bye week. During the bye week, we obviously saw him up there. I don't think that there was any question as to what was going to happen with his job and his security. But either way, he was looking down the barrel of a shotgun, is what I'll say. Joe Schoen, especially from the fans. And he gets up there today, and he looked as nervous as I have ever seen anyone, especially someone associated with a franchise, whether it be in MLB, whether it be in the NFL, whether it be in the NBA, or whether it be in the NHL. No one I have ever seen has looked that uncomfortable in front of the media as Joe Schoen did today. So I just wanted to point that out. That was hilarious. Something that, you know how much training the guy got for that? You know how many PR people the Giants employ to prepare him for that sort of introduction? You could tell that, not going to say that there's some vitriol between the two of them, but you could see that I don't know, they're putting out all these pictures and videos of Joe Schoen and John Harbaugh looking all buddy-buddy. I think that that's a pretty sensationalized and fictional narrative. I don't believe that for a second. I'm not going to say there's vitriol between the two of them, but I think how nervous Joe Schoen was when he stepped up to the podium tells us all we need to know. That was hilarious. Prayers out to him. Hopefully he can breathe. Hopefully he can bring his nervousness down. And hopefully he can get some sleep for the next few weeks. His job is safe. He should be able to relax. He's still a GM of an NFL team. And John Harbaugh, at least publicly, has given him his stamp of approval. And maybe he feels slighted. Maybe he feels like, hey, listen, I'm not as good at my job as I'd like to think. Maybe he feels a little pathetic. The fact that the Giants hired a head coach and completely changed their organizational structure in order to get said head coach. And that obviously demotes Joe Schoen, down the pecking order just a little bit. So that was my first takeaway from the press conference. Joe Schoen, work on your breathing, man. Figure it out. Take Zoloft. I don't know. Take Lexapro. Seemed like a mess. But let's talk about John Harbaugh and what he had to say. And I want to get into the press conference questions and all that kind of stuff. But, I have some notes. And the first thought that I had when he stepped up to that podium is, when was the last time we saw a Giants head coach command the room like that? When was the last time we saw anyone associated with the Giants go up there and seem like the adult in the room? Where you looked at that guy and said, he's been there and he's done that. He knows what he's talking about. And this doesn't necessarily translate to guys who have been successful and have won a Super Bowl in the past. I think a great recent example of that is Curt Cignetti at his introductory press conference with Indiana. You saw the confidence there. He was coming from JMU to the Big Ten. And it seemed like he was getting ready to coach his kids' under 15 football team, his kids' AAU basketball team. He looked confident, looked the part. John Harbaugh looked the same. And again, this does come from, it comes with the territory. The guy is an established, successful NFL head coach. You can't say the same about 90% of the people who become head coaches who are eventually fired. There's only a select few guys. Look at this clown. Some guy outside my window. He's definitely got a small penis. Sorry. But you could see that there's a confidence there. You could see that this is the exact type of coach the Giants have needed. An adult in the room, a leader amongst men. And I asked the question, I posed the question. It was kind of rhetorical of when was the last time we saw a head coach command the room like that? And it's Tom Coughlin, guys. It's Tom Coughlin. There are certain things that need to happen in certain cities with certain teams. The Giants need to be a hard-nosed physical football team. They need to dominate in the trenches. They need to be a serious football team in all areas, especially on defense. And we've seen a lack of that. We've seen a significant level of incompetence from this team, no matter who the head coach, no matter who the GM has been since Tom Coughlin stepped down as Giants head coach and Ben McAdoo took over. So it's been a very long time. That's the answer to that question. You heard a lot from John Harbaugh about there being one mission. The collective love for the game of football. And of course, he's going to sit up there. He's going to stand up there. And he's going to tell you that he has Super Bowl aspirations for this team. Why else would he take a job? Why else would anyone take a job with any franchise? That's what everyone always says. We're going to compete for championships. We're going to turn the organization around. Everything is going to change under me. The difference was with Harbaugh is it seemed like he actually believed it and seemed throughout all the stuff that he outlined throughout his press conference, seemed like he actually has a way to accomplish that. It's not just empty words. It's not just going up there and saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, but not actually have a plan to do so. We'll figure it out as we go. That is not the case with John Harbaugh. And you could tell that immediately. You could tell that based on the level of success in making the playoffs 66% of the time, 2/3 of the time with the Baltimore Ravens. So he talked a lot about the collective love for football. Talked about if you don't love football, you shouldn't be on this team. That's what they play, right? They play football. So of course, guys on the team should love football, correct? But we've seen sort of a level of dejectiveness from the players in the Giants over the past few years. And, it kind of comes with the territory, the fact that the Giants have been incompetent, as I've mentioned, as you know, and completely uncompetitive. But it seemed like there was a mutual understanding when John Harbaugh stepped into the facility in East Rutherford. You either live, eat, breathe, and sleep Giants football, you get the fuck out of here. And that was the common trend throughout that press conference. Like, listen, I love the game of football. I need my players to love the game of football. We're going to do things the right way. I do love the comment that he made about the physicality and being able to finish, which I think is pretty ironic considering the fact that one of the reasons why the Ravens fired John Harbaugh is that why they, is because they continued to blow games. So he did say when he talked to Andy Reid that change could be good. So hopefully the Giants buck that trend and stop blowing games. Maybe two negatives make a positive. The Giants are blowing games before Harbaugh, and Harbaugh was blowing games for the Giants. Maybe the combination, maybe the marriage settles that. But, he did talk about Jackson Dart, did say what we've all heard from the media members, and the fact that, he's watched a lot of tape on Jackson Dart, spoken with Jackson Dart, has been impressed by what Jackson Dart has had to say in their meetings, and has been impressed by who Jackson Dart is as a leader and as a football guy. And the fact that he is into it as much as John Harbaugh is into it. And again, this is just all draws back to the common trend of loving football, loving the game of football. And the other part of it, kind of all ties back to Joe Schoen. Obviously he was asked about Joe Schoen immediately. I think Garofalo, however you pronounce his name, of NFL Network was the one who asked this question. Maybe someone else. Correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe Paul Schwartz. He did mention, he did put him over and saying, Joe Schoen is impressive. He's very impressed by Joe Schoen, that Joe Schoen, has got notes on almost every player in the league, that he's got a good feel for his own players. I beg to defer, considering the fact that he paid Darius Slayton $12 million a year, and that's someone who came from his own facility. But I digress. He did say, Joe Schoen, kept reiterating it, Joe Schoen, impressive. I don't know, man. I can't see how this marriage ends well. I think Joe Schoen seemed competent enough to John Harbaugh for Harbaugh to take the job. Of course, he needed to if the Giants ownership insisted on keeping him. I don't know. Maybe he's got, I don't know. Maybe Joe Schoen has some dirt on these guys on Giants ownership. But it seemed like there could be some discord between the two of them. And something Harbaugh later mentioned when, I asked a question about like who he's going to report to, he said, we all report to the boss. We all report to John Mara. And he said that John Mara runs football operations. It's something that we've known, of course. But I think it is important to note that this is the head coach saying that. After all the things that we've read, after all the things we've heard about those negotiations, you could see why he did that. He doesn't want to go through an intermediary with Joe Schoen. He doesn't want to have to deal with him. Will that create issues come draft? Come free agency? Come maybe a potential trade of Kayvon Thibodeau? Will those things arise? We don't know. But what we do know, this guy is an adult in the room. He talked specifically about how he is going to change the culture. And he said, again, bringing in guys who love the game of football and going through every single level of what the Giants do, whether it be, he said lifting, whether it be, what day is going to be in workouts, whether it be defensive schemes, whether it be blitz scenarios, all that kind of stuff he talked about. Because as I said before, you heard a lot of these guys with the Giants, whether it be former GMs, whether it be former head coaches, stand up there, say they're going to change the culture, but not actually give a reason how they're going to do it. A proven reason. Now, a lot of first-time head coaches seem competent. A lot of them don't seem competent. But what doesn't always translate are the results. Did it seem like Liam Cohen was very confident when he sat up there and said Duval and looked like an idiot? Became the laughingstock of the internet? No. Looked like a dumbass. How many people were saying Liam Cohen was going to lead the Jaguars to even more, like another era of losing? And he's not going to be able to unlock Trevor Lawrence like he was able to unlock Baker Mayfield. Well, guess what happened? Liam Cohen turned the entire franchise around for the Jaguars. So there's no rhyme or reason for how that looks to the naked eye in terms of a head coach. But, there are some guarantees when it comes to football and in life. Death, taxes. And a guy established as much as John Harbaugh is established, standing up there, telling you this is how it's going to be done, That's a guarantee. Now, whether the organization has bad voodoo surrounding it, whether we are going to see the ineptitude of the Giants continue into the future, whether there's going to continue to be smarm from the Giants brass directed at the fans through their inaction, through their comments to the media, whether there's going to be a level of indignance when it comes to that. There's no guarantees, and I'm not trying to sit here and rain down on our parade, but it's important to keep note of the fact that there are no guarantees to what the results are going to be. What we do know is that there will be a competent strategy to drive winning. Now, whether the players perform or not, it's a crapshoot. But what's important is the fact that the Giants have the players necessary in order to win. Now, have guys in the past been able to unlock those players? No. John Harbaugh spoke about the talent in that locker room. He talked about that being one of the driving points to him taking this job. Talked about Jackson Dart. This team has talent. It is yet to be unlocked. And it appears that John Harbaugh's strategy could accomplish that. Something that has not been done from any Giants head coach or any Giants GM since Tom Coughlin and Jerry Reese. So, listen, I'm hyped up. I didn't mean to sit here and what the hell that is. Turning off that. I didn't mean to sit here and bring down the mood, but I feel like that's a good time to transition to the second topic of the day, which is the New York Knicks. I didn't want to go from here to here, so I kind of went like this, and then we're going to go all the way to the bottom of the barrel and rock bottom when it comes to the team that, as most of you know, that I care about the most, and that's the New York Knicks, a team that was the significant favorite to be the Eastern Conference champion, the team that would represent the Eastern Conference in the NBA Finals, and it appeared that they finally got their break. They got extremely unlucky, and they blew game one of the Eastern Conference Finals in historic fashion. They lost in game 6, but if they won that game, there should have been a game 7 at the Garden, and the Knicks were potentially going to be playing for a chance to make the NBA Finals. So they came within 2 games of the NBA Finals, 1 game of making a game 7, then 1 game of making the NBA Finals. This Knicks team right now is an absolute shell of itself. And not to be the person to say, told you so, but if you look back and if you remember how I felt about that cat trade, you can understand why this isn't shocking to me. You can understand why I'm sitting here not shocked by what is happening in front of our very own eyes. And there's another conversation to be had about the Knicks head coach, Mike Brown, and the lack of buying into his system that the Knicks have exhibited. That's another story for another day. But it's another I told you so. I wanted the Knicks to go out and sign an established assistant head coach. Not a guy who, according to multiple people, lost the locker room in Sacramento, lost the locker room back with the Lakers, was fired from multiple jobs as head coach. And you're going to bring in a guy that lost multiple locker rooms across different franchises? That's how you're going to do things? So I was never really on board with that. I did think that there needed to be a change at the top of the organization. I guess 1 tier below the top of the organization with the head coach. I didn't think Tom Thibodeau was the right head coach at the time. I feel like his system was extremely antiquated, and he was indignant on making changes that the front office deemed were needed to be made. And you look at what's happening right now. You look at the lack of cohesiveness on the court. You look at the comments being made, the half-ass comments, the passive-aggressive bullshit that we're seeing, especially from Karl Anthony Towns, and you can surmise just as well as I can that there's clearly stuff going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. There's clearly a lack of cohesiveness, not just on the court, but in the locker room as well. And it has resulted in the Knicks losing 9 of their last 11 games. A stretch that I don't think anyone thought was possible. And it might take the cake as the worst stretch under Leon Rose and under the Leon Rose era. And watching what we're watching on a nightly basis. Have you ever seen this talented of a team play this poorly together? Have you ever seen this talented of a team? This deep of a team? Just not try? Just not give all of their effort every night on the basketball court? Have we seen that as Knicks fans? No, we haven't. And you look back at the 2012, 2013 team, yeah, they won a lot of games. They're second in the Eastern Conference in wins. They did not have nearly as much talent on that team as this team does. Carmelo Anthony, great player, got to his spots, amazing scorer. Was he anywhere near as efficient as Jalen Brunson? No. Maybe they're in the same stratosphere in terms of where they were at their primes in the top players in the NBA. That's fair. The Knicks starting lineup then pales in comparison to the Knicks starting lineup now. So you may ask, what the hell is going on here? What is going on? Well, it appears these players are not satisfied with how they're being used. And I'm sure behind the scenes, they're frustrated with the fact that Jalen Brunson is the focal point of the offense. And the fact that he feels like he dribbles the air out of the basketball on a nightly occasion. And to that, I say this. If you play, let's say you try out for your middle school basketball team, your high school basketball team. Let's say the year before you're the best player on the team. Let's say you're one of the most hyped up players on the team. Let's say you go into that tryout and you don't knock it out of the park. You start in practice not playing too well. You're still going to start because of what the coach sees, potential in, and based on what everyone saw the year before. But that same player, the guy who was not playing his ass off because he doesn't have as big of a role, is going to pout, and he's not going to play as hard as he should be playing. And you know what happens when you don't play as hard as you should be playing? You're not going to have the role that you want to have. If you are not as effective as you should be on the court, you are going to be unsatisfied with the level of usage that you get on the court. Do I agree that Jalen Brunson is used way too much? Yes. Do I believe that's somewhat necessary? Also, yes. He's the one guy who can consistently create and score the basketball. I have harped on this repeatedly, whether it be on my TikTok, on my live streams. I hated the Karl Anthony Towns trade when it was made. And I think the extent to which he has faltered as a basketball player, especially over the course of the last few months, is worse than worst case scenario in all of our minds. It is astonishing as I've done 24 minutes without my mic being connected. My apologies. That's classic, almost as incompetent as these Knicks. When you look at how bad he's playing, when you look at how poorly he's shooting the basketball, how inefficient he is, we know about his defensive woes. We know about his inability to defend the pick and roll. But he is more than made up for it in his career with his ability to space the floor and his ability to knock down threes at a high rate. Like, you know what, guys? He's shooting less than 35% from three. Putrid. Not good enough. You traded him for the space. Tom Thibodeau failed to utilize him in the best way possible by throwing Josh Hart out there constantly when Josh Hart was shooting 28% from three. So you didn't get the full usage out of Karl-Anthony Towns. You figure they fire Tom Thibodeau, Karl-Anthony Towns must be thrilled, right? Now I finally get the spacing. I finally will get at least some space to get my shots off because the drive and kick is going to be open a lot more of the time with the entire middle of the court open. That's not what we're seeing. Players are right up in his grill because every time he tries to drive past his defender, he uses that hook, tries to throw the defender behind him. And it results in him being in foul trouble every freaking night. Like, whether it be on defense, sorry, I gotta drink my pre-workout right now. Whether it be on the defensive end, whether it be on the offensive end as well. He's not providing enough to the Knicks right now. He even played 25 minutes. The guy's got a player option of $62 million in 3 years. No wonder the Timberwolves were itching at getting rid of him. And look at the haul they got. Look at the guys they got. Can you imagine if the Knicks still had Donte DiVincenzo? What are they lacking the most right now? Besides efficiency, which is only so important. What are they lacking the most? They are lacking physicality. They are lacking effort. What is one thing that you knew Donte DiVincenzo was going to provide the team every single night? Effort and physicality. This Knicks team is too soft. They're too soft. The one guy who plays hard, the one guy who fights through the pain, who fights through the contact, Josh Hart. And by extension, Jalen Brunson. Of course, not defensively. But you know he's going to give it all on the offensive end. And you might say, "Oh, Bryce, it's not hard for Jalen Brunson to do that because he gets the ball all the time." He's Jalen Brunson. He deserves to get the ball all the time. And you look at, the stretch of basketball, because that's what we're focusing on here. And, I've got some stats to back this up. And Karl-Anthony Towns over his last 10 games is averaging 17.5 points, 10 rebounds. Congratulations, 3 assists. Shooting 43% from the field. And here's the worst stat, 32.4% from three. 32.4% from three. And you got OG Anunoby. Look at him. He's averaging 17.2 points. He's averaging 5.6 rebounds. He's averaging 2.6 assists. Shooting 46% overall. And you remember the last couple of years, the one guy in the Knicks that had the highest plus minus, no matter what, without fail, OG Anunoby. Well, guess what? Over the last 11 games, his plus minus has been shit. Terrible. So not only are you not getting the best effort and the best play out of Karl-Anthony Towns, you're not getting anything from OG Anunoby as well. You're not even seeing it on the defensive end. And I'm not going to sit here and rip OG Anunoby for the lack of transition defense. I'm not going to rip him for the complete inability to defend the three-point line. This is not a new issue, too. This has been, the Knicks' Achilles heel for the last 20 years. Literally, no matter who the coach is, no matter who the players are, they cannot defend the three to save their lives. I'm not going to put all of these issues on OG Anunoby because he has to make up for so much on the defensive end. There's this narrative out there about Mikal Bridges that he's this amazing defender. There's this narrative that Wingstop is one of the best defensive wing tandems in the league. How's that working out for you? How often do you watch big guards post up Mikal Bridges and get to their spots easily? Is Mikal Bridges a top-end off-ball defender? Absolutely. Is he amazing in the passing lanes? Absolutely. Is he a below-average on-ball defender? Yeah, he is. He is. Like, all of the off-ball defensive qualities and abilities put him over the top as an above-average defender. Makes him a good defender. It does. But on ball, he constantly needs help. So that draws OG Anunoby over, and it leaves a guy open for three because Cat's utterly incompetent at getting out of shooters, at reading opposing offenses, at knowing where the open man is, about knowing how to rotate defensively. Cat is a cancer to this team. And, I may not have loved Julius Randle. And I may have been aware how important the loss of Isaiah Hartenstein was to the team. But I never felt that Karl Anthony Towns was the solution there. I found it essential for the Knicks to go about their year. Sure, they they wouldn't have had a center for the first 4 months of the season until Mitchell Robinson came back in late February last year. They could have went out and gotten someone. They could have found someone competent enough to play the center. Could have tried Randall out at center. Gone small ball constantly. They refused to do that. Tom Thibodeau refused to do that. James Dolan stepped in, and the Knicks made the trade for Karl Anthony Towns. And they gave up Dante DiVincenzo. And here's the other thing. The Knicks tried to trade Mitchell Robinson in that trade. Tried to include him. Timberwolves wouldn't budge. So the Knicks said, you know what? F it. We really need a center. Throw DiVincenzo in the trade. And I'm almost happy that Mitch wasn't included in that trade, although after last season, he only had one more year left on his deal. This is his final deal of his contract. The 4-year, 54, whatever the hell, $1 million contract that he signed a couple years ago, 60, whatever it was, paying him like $50 million a year. That's expiring. DiVincenzo, he signed the mid-level exception. He was signed for 4 years. He's got 2 more years of his contract after this. So you have him under contract for a massive bargain. But Mitchell Robinson is a game changer. He is. Now, would it have been nice to keep DiVincenzo and Mitch? 100%. Would it have been nice to not trade for Karl Anthony Towns at all? Yeah, it would have been. And there were people out here on this app celebrating that trade, saying that this is going to put them over the top. This is going to allow them to copy exactly what the Boston Celtics did the season before, and the 5-out offense that leads you to be able to take 45, 53s a game. 43s a game. And Tom Thibodeau's style of coaching did not allow that. And thus, the Knicks were left with no choice but to trade for Karl Anthony Towns. Because they knew the coach wasn't going to fully adopt it. They also knew the coach, Tom Thibodeau, was extremely reluctant to try Julius Randle at the 5. It barely happened the season before. Barely. Begging Tom Thibodeau, at least try it. What's the worst that can happen? And you heard rumors a couple days before about, Julius Randle and him potentially being tried at center. And I remember making a video a couple of days before Julius Randle was traded in that trade for Karl Anthony Towns. And I said, this is amazing. It's revelation. What a report. Boy, how excited I am that Julius Randle's finally going to get utilized at the 5. What's the worst that could happen? What do you have to lose? And the Knicks ended up trading him like 24, 48 hours later. So, instead of at least trying it, seeing what they had, and I was an advocate, I didn't love Randle, but I was an advocate of at least seeing what Randle could be at the 5. How the team fared over 3 or 4 months span, and then you regroup at the trade deadline. And let's say Cat went out there, didn't have the best year. Well, guess what? His value is now lower. Let's say DiVincenzo added on to his amazing year that he had before. Let's say DiVincenzo had the chance to play with his Villanova buddies and started to play like an all-star. There were too many uncertainties, too many things that the Knicks refused to see. And they went out and they made that trade. And look where they are right now. You expect the number of primetime games for next season. I mean, listen, we got to see what the hell happens in this season. We got to see how the season ends. I think part of my, I started this Knicks talk, and if you missed the Giants talk about John Harbaugh, when I'm done with this, you could scroll back to the start. Apologies, I didn't have my mic on, so it doesn't sound the best. But I got into this Knicks talk about 17 minutes in, and I mentioned being disassociated from this team. I mentioned for my own mental health not being totally locked into the team because that's just how I've been dealing with things lately, whether it be politics, whatever it may be. Because things affect me. And I think part of my disassociation is the belief that things are going to turn around here. The belief that the Knicks will figure it out and they'll turn things around. And after what we saw yesterday, the MLK Day game against the Dallas Mavericks, without the majority of their best players, I think that shook me to my core and compelled me to again start to focus in on that. Now the Giants have a head coach, free agencies, a month and a half, like that's certainly an interesting time and something that I'll be talking about a lot. The Knicks are now the focal point of, all of our fandoms, if you're a Knicks fan. Yankees haven't done anything. The fuck have the Mets done? Jets are not doing anything differently. So what the hell? Time to get all depressed about the Knicks. That's where I'm at right now. And I figure that I'm preaching to the choir here with everything that I've shared, the sentiment that I feel. It's pathetic. What we're seeing is Knicks 2015, 2016 level of play when Lou Amundsen was starting games. When Aaron Aflalo, a few years later, was the best player on the team. When Alonzo Trier was getting up 15 shots a game. That's how bad this Knicks team has looked. And they've shown a complete lack of effort. They're getting killed in transition, which is just inexcusable. No one gets back on defense. No one is bought into this team. They don't look like they're playing hard for Mike Brown, and that's a shame. It really is. And who knows what the hell is going to happen? I've had a few conversations with some friends who have reached out and like, what are the Knicks going to do? I don't know. We've heard the Knicks are in conversations with other teams about Karl-Anthony Towns. Who wants him? Who wants that contract? Why the hell would the Knicks attach? The other thing is, no one wants the contract. Why the hell would the Knicks attach a pick or a player? Let's say that they give up Deuce McBride in a trade that sends Karl-Anthony Towns out of New York. Why the hell would they ever do that? They might look to Mike Brown before. I mean, I think it would be unprecedented for James Dolan to eat like $60 million guaranteed to fired coach in their own. I think it would also be unprecedented to fire a head coach in his first season in the middle of his first season. Like, you don't see that ever. But with James Dolan saying and reiterating a million times, this is a championship season, like, I tend to think that them firing Mike Brown might be more likely than them trading Karl-Anthony Towns. Like, because of assets. And I just don't know, who on that coaching staff would take over. Like, listen, this is hopefully a topic that I only have to discuss now, and they could turn it around here. It shouldn't take having one of the best players in the court for you to be able to compete, especially against a team like the Suns the other night, and the night before, or 2 nights before, and the home and away. What we've seen is just, I use depressed, dejecting. I don't know. I really just, again, I'm trying to disassociate, but I'm fully back into the fold, and it's hard not to be. It's bad. This is bad. Code red. Can't lose that game that they lost yesterday, and you can't lose in the fashion they did, being down 28 points at halftime, giving up 75 points. Sure, you play better in the second half. Hopefully they can build on that, but you give up 75 points. Max Christie almost sets the Garden record for threes made in a game. Come on. It's inexcusable. And I don't like, the issue is like, this isn't because the players just simply playing bad. It's a bad stretch. They're not playing hard for their head coach. They don't like their roles. How is that going to change overnight? You're 9-11 here. You're, what, a game and a half outside of the play-in? The play-in? You've got the Cavs playing better than you? The Pistons with significantly less talent? What they do better than you is they've got the physicality and their team is built around what they do the best. The Detroit Pistons, what do you think of when you think of them? Toughness, physicality, fouling hard, sticking up for their guys. The Knicks don't have that. New York teams are very similar to Detroit teams in that. They get in the trenches. They fight hard. To blue-collar working cities. And you see their sports teams, when they're successful, reflect that. That's just something that I believe in. And I tend to be proved true a lot. And the Knicks are just not built like that. They're not. They traded away two of their toughest players. Say what you want about Randall. Say what you want about his body language. Say what you want about taking every other game off, it felt like, offensively. Defensively, when he didn't have it offensively. Well, we're seeing the exact same thing for Cat and for significant, larger amount of money. That's where I'm at. That's why it's code red, because, you can't move that contract. Never made sense for a guy who doesn't play defense. I don't know. I really don't know. So yeah, I mean, let's see. Let's see. I've got nothing else to say. Thanks everyone for tuning in today. At least the Giants just hired John Harbaugh. I mean, like, that's the one thing I got going for me. So stay tuned. More Giants content. One Giant Step is Sean Morash. Going to release that later today. I think we're going to record. Sean is actually at the press conference. That should be yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely something that we're going to be doing. Just confirmed with Sean. So check that out wherever you get your podcast. Also, again, Knicks talk coming your way. I'm back. They brought me back in because they suck. So they continue to suck. I have no choice. I got to do it. Thanks everyone for tuning in. If you missed the Giant stuff, scroll back. I talk about it until like the 17-minute mark, I think. And then I get into the next talk. So if you want to watch that, you can scroll back to that as well. Thanks everyone for tuning in. And I'll speak to you all very soon.